Finding Nemo has made itself into a classic even though it hasn't been technically recognized as one. However, even with the film Finding Dory, where we saw Dory explore more and use her talents to her advantage. Some may not see short-term memory as an advantage, but regardless, it was funny to watch her on her journey and joyous to see her reunite with her family. Whether Finding Nemo was one of your favorite or not, there are elements that make it very authentic, and the animation itself is one of them, which we will touch on a little later. But before we get into it, some trivia for you. Who was this film dedicated to the memory of? Leave your guesses in the comments down below and stick around to the end of the video to find out if your answer was correct. Emotion is very important within a story. First, I want to talk about the emotional journey of it all. We learn that Marlin is protective of Nemo and we know why. We didn't see this much force of Marlin in the beginning, but we didn't get much time with him to see if he has always been like this, so we can assume that he has been this way because he lost most of his children and Coral. Even with all that he lost, he was grateful to have one being spared. There are a few reasons why Finding Nemo is such an emotional movie. First, the story is about a father and son relationship, and the father is trying to find his son who is lost. This is a very relatable story for many people, and it is very easy to feel empathy for the father character. There are two parts to the emotional journey, Marlin and Dory's. Of course, we focus on the journey between Marlin and Nemo, with Marlin in a crisis missing his only son, something he was traumatized with when losing most of his children in the beginning, and Nemo being only a child, learning to have faith in his father, believing he will find him somehow. We get introduced to Dory, a very special character with somewhat of a disability. Marlin struggles not only to find his son, but handling Dory during some points. But at the same time, Dory develops a connection to Marlin. Marlin was short with forgetful Dory at first, but the two quickly relied on each other. Dory's memory wouldn't have gotten better without Marlin, and Marlin wouldn't have found his son without Dory. Because of their journey, these two had some of the best quotes and are one of Disney's best friendships.
And I look at you and I'm home.
Dory's character is a category itself. Many fans of this film fell in love with Dory and who she was. She was caring, forgetful, and even with her flaws, she follows Marlin on his journey and tries her best regardless. That's one thing that children can take away from this, is never giving up, even when things get tough. We know Dory has this incredible story once Finding Dory comes out and we get to understand her more so. The best thing the creators could have done with her was not only create this character with flaws, but a strong character that still has room to grow, which has Dory's name written all over it. There are numerous amounts of theories that surround her, especially since the sequel release, but overall we see Dory as a fun-loving character that wants the best for everyone around her. Including anything in a story that would have a relation to anything isn't technically necessary to put into a story, but it does help tremendously. Aside from children, the parents watching this film can see that Marlin wants what he thinks is best to protect his son without completely caging him. He also underestimates him. Gladly, Nemo knew he could do better, as he proved to. We see that he carries his overprotectiveness over to Dory. I myself have been parented by someone who saw nothing but danger outside of the place that we called home and kept me in, believing I was not capable, and this is what I talk about when I say people can relate to the internal story, which is being semi-sheltered, not even realizing you are doing so as the purpose is to protect. In the end, however, he learns that Nemo is more capable. The plot point in any story revolves around a moment in your story that impacts your character or the direction of the story in some way. It links directly to your character arc, giving them conflict to overcome on their journey to enlightenment and change. Now, some could count this as the very beginning scene where Coral gets attacked. However, that's a little too early in the story for a character arc, even though something like that could be dramatic enough for a character arc. However, we haven't spent enough time with Marlin to know what the shift is. As a result of the most dynamic moment in the story's first half having taken place so early, the rest of the first act is arguably the weakest part of the movie. The two-sided door opened by the key event is finally closed for Nemo when his first plot point has him landing in the dentist's aquarium, his adventure world of the second act. The first plot point would be considered when Marlin loses Nemo on the boat. Not only was he traumatized by losing all of his family, but the last one is now lost. The beginning scene allowed us to understand his state of mind in this moment. From this moment, we can look at Nemo in the tank. Nemo grew up with only one parent, not questioning about a mother, but not reliant on his father for protection or being glued to his hip. If anything, it would be the opposite. He approaches looking for his dad, as it's the only fish he knows. As he gets closer to those in the tank, we learn that being away from his father is starting to be healthy for him. And even when he gets discouraged, when he gets stuck, he has people around him who push him, knowing that he is able to do it. After this is proven, Nemo himself starts to learn that he is more capable. In Nemo, the midpoint comes after Marlin has made the crucial error not to trust Dory. Our childlike Nemo proxy is going through the deep, boogie trench, and his refusal to trust directly leads to Dory getting hurt. She's stung by jellyfish. Then comes Crush. Dory comes as a supporting character to Marlin in his journey, and even though it can be challenging, Crush teaches him that not everything is dangerous.
Oh my goodness!
Whoa, kill the motor, dude. Let us see what Squirt does flying solo.
The first scene of the movie explains the complexity of the father and son relationship that Marlin and Nemo have. The loss and tragedy of Marlin's wife and all of his eggs, except one that Marlin suffered at the beginning, really explains his controlling nature. Both Nemo and Marlin learn to grow in their own ways, almost like it was a good thing that they were separated, giving them time away from each other for once. At that point, once they come back together, they learn from both their flaws and develop a stronger relationship.
Love you, Dad.
I love you too, son.
Aside from all the storytelling and the theme character traits and stories, we can appreciate the animation that went into it all. Back in the early 2000s, to ensure that movements of the fish in the film were believable, the animators took a crash course in fish biology and oceanography. Water movement is one of the hardest parts of animation, almost tied with hair movement depending on the hairstyle.
So we start by making the water move back and forth. That's surge and swell.
And then we put particulate in, which is like dirt moving in the water. And then we put this caustic light pattern that kind of dances all over everything.
Why don't you use true refractions as modulated by the water's surface?
I should have thought of that.
With all the hard work that the creators have put into this film, that alone is a reason to love the film all the more. Aside from all the theories surrounding this film that make it more darker than it really is, the concept of creating the entire story of a fish searching for a son who isn't even in the ocean makes you wonder how on earth that could even be possible and keeps you watching longer, holding your attention on how they might reunite or if this would even have a happy ending. Considering this is a Pixar film, it's predictable that it would be because it's Disney. On the flip side, the concept is the reason we were interested. Finding Nemo taught us that parents as authority figures aren't always right and that it's okay for them to make mistakes. After all, they're only human and most of the times they are just learning how to be parents along the way. Continuing from the first lesson, it's key to always communicate what you're feeling and why. Since communication is a two-way process, this holds true for both parents and children. Imagine if Marlin had been honest with Nemo from the beginning about why he felt so protective of him. Nemo would have never felt the need to rebel and touch the boat and get fish napped, and we probably wouldn't have had a movie plot. And in terms of our trivia question, this film was dedicated to the memory of Glenn McQueen, who died in 2002, a Pixar animator who would later be honored as a namesake of Lightning McQueen in Cars in 2006. But I'm very curious to know what was your favorite part of this film and what did you think made the key difference in the success of it all, whether it would be the characters or a certain decision that a character made.